Before the first punch echoed through the arena in Tokyo, before the packed crowd rose to its feet, and before Stephen Fulton felt the cold shock of canvas under his gloves, this was never just another fight. This was something bigger. An epic clash fueled by pride, suspicion, and the question of who truly belonged among boxing's elite. Stephen Fulton stepped onto foreign soil not just as a champion, but as the unified king at 122 pounds. Undefeated, highly respected, and widely seen as the slickest technician in his weight class, Fulton had built his reputation through grit and skill rather than highlight real knockouts. But across the ring stood a different kind of force. Naoya Inoue wasn't simply a challenger moving up in weight. He was a phenomenon, a monster who had left destruction behind him in 3 weight divisions. From the first moment talk of this fight began, the boxing world sensed that history was waiting to be made. Yet, the build-up took a darker turn when Fulton's team accused Inoue of cheating, claiming his hand wraps were illegally stacked to create almost weapon-like fists. Those accusations ignited tension that transformed anticipation into hostility. It became more than just a contest for belts. It became a collision of cultures, a battle of trust against suspicion, and a test of who truly belonged at the top of the sport. Long before this showdown, Naoya Inoue had built a myth around himself that felt almost larger than life. His journey didn't just start with talent. It started with a kind of controlled fury that opponents couldn't answer. At only 20, Inoue captured his first world title, instantly marking himself as a prodigy. He didn't just win fights, he dismantled rivals with a blend of speed, timing, and ruthless precision. Opponents walked into the ring with hope, but many left questioning their careers. His legend truly crystallized in 2019 during his unforgettable war against Nonito Donaire. That night, fans saw the monster push to his absolute limit, his eyes swollen shut, but refusing to fold. The fight went 12 punishing rounds and ended with Inoue's hand raised, a moment that turned skeptics into believers. And in the rematch, Inoue made an even louder statement, dismantling Donaire in 2 rounds, proving he didn't just survive tough fights. He learned from them and came back deadlier. By unifying all 4 belts at bantamweight, Inoue could have rested, enjoyed the glow of his accomplishments, and padded his record with easier defenses. Instead, he set his sights higher. Moving to super bantamweight wasn't just a step up, it was a leap toward history. And Inoue didn't want a soft introduction. He wanted Stephen Fulton, the recognized best at 122 pounds. Stephen Fulton's path to the top wasn't forged by knockout power or viral moments. Instead, he built his legacy the hard way, through tough fights and smart boxing. Born and bred in Philadelphia, Fulton carried the spirit of his city, resilient, sharp, and never afraid to step into the fire. Fulton's rise included wars against tough opponents like Angelo Leo and Brandon Figueroa. Against Leo, he didn't dance away from danger. He stood in close quarters, trading punches, showing that he could win not just by boxing from a distance, but by beating fighters at their own game. Against Figueroa, a pressure fighter who threw punches in waves, Fulton stayed calm, picked his moments, and showed the discipline to win on the scorecards despite relentless pressure. By 2023, Fulton had earned the reputation as the man at 122 pounds. He wasn't a paper champion, he was the real thing, a fighter who didn't duck challenges. So, when Inoue called him out, Fulton didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for a neutral site or an easier first fight in the new division for Inoue. Instead, he agreed to fight Inoue in Japan, right in the monster's home territory. Fulton believed in his boxing IQ, his slick defense, and his reach advantage. He trusted that his American rhythm and movement would confuse Inoue, who had never faced someone quite like him. And he spoke with quiet confidence, telling fans, "He hasn't fought anybody like me." His supporters believed this wasn't arrogance. It was a champion's conviction. In the weeks before the fight, as anticipation built, the mood turned sour. Fulton's trainer, Wahid Rahim, publicly accused Inoue of wrapping his hands illegally, suggesting he might have fought previous fights with what amounted to loaded gloves. Rahim claimed to have video evidence, threatening to pull Fulton from the fight if they weren't satisfied with the wraps on fight night. These weren't small complaints whispered in private. They were loud, direct challenges that painted Inoue as a possible cheat in his own country. Japanese media covered the accusations with shock and quiet anger. Some American fans defended Fulton's team, saying they were just making sure the fight was fair. Others saw it as a sign of doubt, a crack in the armor of Fulton's confidence. The Japanese Boxing Commission acted quickly, promising total transparency. They allowed Fulton's team to inspect every layer of tape and gauze, ensuring that everything was done by the book. Under the calm lights of the Tokyo arena, Inoue watched with cold eyes as his hands were wrapped, knowing that for Fulton's camp, it wasn't just about rules, it was a way to shake his confidence. But for Inoue, the effect was the opposite. The accusations weren't just about hand wraps. They were a direct challenge to everything he had accomplished. They suggested his power wasn't real, that his knockouts weren't earned, that his legend was built on cheating. Inoue, a man of few words, didn't say much in response, but those close to him saw the change. A quiet fury under the surface, a determination to prove his greatness wasn't fake. As the first bell rang inside the Ariake Arena, anticipation gave way to reality. Gone were the interviews and theories. Now, it was just two men, each carrying everything they believed into the ring. Inoue started aggressively, not with reckless power, but with cold precision. His lead hand hung low, an open dare to Fulton to test him. His jab was stiff, snapping out like a whip, and it immediately disrupted Fulton's rhythm. Fulton tried to stay composed, using his lateral movement and sharp jab. But something became clear almost at once. Fulton's jab, so effective against other fighters, was being read and countered before it fully extended. Fulton circled and bounced, trying to keep distance, but Inoue's footwork was masterful. He wasn't chasing Fulton in wide loops. He was cutting off the ring, stepping just enough to keep Fulton from resetting. Every small step carried intent, and every feint drew a reaction. By the end of the first round, Inoue had landed clean counters, while Fulton's punches barely touched the target. In the respectful silence of the Japanese crowd, the shift in momentum was obvious. The supposed puncher was outboxing the supposed boxer. Round after round, Inoue turned up the pressure, not wildly, but systematically. In round 2, he doubled up on the jab, then launched sudden right hands upstairs, making Fulton hesitate. His angles were ruthless. One moment he was in front, the next he was to the side, landing short, sharp combinations. Fulton's usual confidence began to erode. Against other opponents, he controlled tempo with his jab, forcing them to react to him. Against Inoue, the timing advantage was reversed. Inoue was the one dictating pace, landing first, leaving Fulton reacting and guessing. Inoue didn't waste energy. Every punch had purpose, and his defense was subtle but effective. Slight head movements, small pivots, and perfect balance. Even when Fulton tried to catch him, Inoue was already gone, ready to counter. Fulton's team urged him to use more footwork and change levels, But the deeper problem wasn't strategy, it was timing. Fulton was always a half step behind. By round 4, Inoue's dominance became almost unsettling. He began smiling between exchanges, acknowledging when Fulton landed, but answering instantly with faster, harder shots. It was psychological warfare, showing Fulton that nothing he did would change the outcome. Fulton's face began to tell the story. A nose bleeding, blinking more often, breathing heavier. Meanwhile, Inoue looked fresh, his punches as sharp in the 4th round as in the 1st. His left hooks to the body started to slow Fulton's legs. His right hands pierced through Fulton's guard, turning defense into desperation. By the end of round 5, the fight's narrative had flipped completely. It wasn't Fulton, the master boxer, controlling the fight. It was Inoue dismantling him piece by piece. Round 6 felt different. Inoue wasn't just controlling, he was escalating. His punches had more snap, and his foot pressure kept Fulton from circling freely. Inoue began drawing out Fulton's reactions with subtle feints, then punishing those reactions with clean counters. Midway through the round, Inoue landed a right hand that rocked Fulton visibly. The crowd gasped. Fulton backed away, tried to smile it off, but Inoue wasn't fooled. He pressed forward, firing a combination that snapped Fulton's head back. Fulton still had his legs, but the spark in his eyes had dimmed. He wasn't dictating anymore. He was surviving. Inoue, calm and ruthless, sensed it. In round 7, the moment came. Inoue stepped in, feinted, and landed a perfect right hand through the middle. Fulton dropped to the canvas, stunned. He beat the count, but barely. When the fight resumed, Inoue smelled blood. He unleashed a precise, merciless flurry, ending with a brutal right to the jaw. Fulton staggered, and the referee stepped in. It was over. 7 rounds of near-perfect dominance. Fulton, the undefeated unified champion, had just been stopped for the first time. As Fulton sat on his stool, shock and exhaustion on his face, the realization spread across the boxing world. This wasn't just a fight. It was a message. Inoue hadn't simply won a belt. He had shattered the belief that moving up in weight would slow him down. Social media exploded. Analysts called it a masterpiece. Former champions praised the performance as a near-perfect blend of technique and power. Even American fans who had backed Fulton acknowledged the truth. Inoue wasn't just hype from the East. He was one of the best fighters alive. Stephen Fulton, humbled but respectful, admitted it himself. "He's real," Fulton said at the press conference. "He's sharp, fast, and smart. I just couldn't find my rhythm." Inoue's win didn't just add another title to his collection, it transformed his legacy. Suddenly, talk shifted from, "Is he great?" to, "How great can he become?" Pound-for-pound lists were reshuffled overnight, with many placing Inoue alongside names like Crawford, Usyk, and Canelo. In Japan, his status reached new heights. Billboards and TV shows hailed him as a national icon. Fans and journalists alike debated what was next. Would he unify the entire division by fighting Marlon Tapales, the other champion at 122? Or would he dare to move up again to 126 pounds? Even outside boxing, Inoue's performance drew attention. UFC President Dana White called him a killer, comparing his dominance to MMA legends. Fans debated whether his calm, ruthless efficiency was boxing's answer to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Quiet outside the ring, merciless inside it. The most logical next fight is Marlon Tapales, who holds the other 2 major belts at 122 pounds. A fight between them would crown an undisputed champion and complete Inoue's conquest of yet another division. But there's a bigger question. If Fulton, in his prime, couldn't last more than 7 rounds, who can? Can anyone at 122 or even 126 slow down the monster? Inoue himself remains humble. "I just want to test myself against the best," he said. He doesn't shout or taunt. He fights and lets the ring do the talking. The monster versus Stephen Fulton wasn't just a fight. It became one of those moments in sports where everything changes. A night when myth turned into reality. Fans around the world now have a new story to tell. I remember where I was when I saw Inoue break down Fulton. In the final scene of that night, Inoue stood in the ring, belts draped over his shoulders, emotionless. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew this was just the beginning. And that, more than anything, is what frightens the boxing world most. If this was only the start of Inoue at 122 pounds, what happens when he truly settles in? Because the monster isn't leaving. And now, everyone knows. He's real. And he's here to stay.